to go.
Okay, so coaching or executive coaching. Now, in terms of coaching versus mentoring, both coaching and mentoring share the same kind of skills, and quite often they share the same kind of processes. But one of the main differences is that coaching tends to be much more about shorter-term performance issues. Mentoring tends to be much more about long-term developmental type issues. So when you're working with an executive, it's very likely that you'll be working with them for a period of, say, 6 sessions or so, and during that time there will be a specific agenda. Now, sometimes that agenda will revolve around some measurement instruments that the organisation might have in place. You may be familiar with such tools as 360-degree feedback, for example, or there may be some appraisal information, or there may be a developmental review documentation. There may be some kind of psychometric assessment which goes with it. One of the most popular ones that we use in the UK, and I think you have it in the US as well, we call it the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. That often is something which accompanies the executive when they come to their first coaching meeting, and can become the basis of the conversations. Now, in terms of coaching with executives, there are a number of different issues and different thoughts that the coachee, as we call them, may want to explore. So one of them may be that they want to think about what things mean to them. They want to develop their understanding. They might want to work on thinking about how the organisation works. They might want to think about their own behaviour and how they relate to other people. They may be thinking about the strategy for the organisation and discuss that through. And one of the main things about executive coaching is that it tends to be very much towards the non-directive end of the helping behaviours. So what the coach does is very rarely put in any kind of input or experience. What they tend to do is ask questions about what the coachee is saying. So in mentoring, for example, you might share some of your experience. In coaching, it's very unlikely that you will do that. One of the most commonly used coaching frameworks that's used in the UK is called the GROW model. And the GROW model has a performance orientation to it. And GROW, the G of GROW stands for goals, and the key here is to spend time with your coachee thinking about what is the goal of this coaching. What is it that the coachee hopes to achieve? And the R of the GROW model is reality. So let's explore what the current reality is in relation to the goal that has been established, and start thinking about what are the issues which surround the ability to achieve that particular goal. The next stage, the O in the GROW process, is what are the options? So exploring what could be done and taking those things and helping your coachee, your executive, to think through the options and choices that they have, and trying to work out which would be the better one to explore. And the final stage of the GROW model is the W, which in some books they will refer to it as the will part, and that's to do with what is your motivation to move forward with one of these options to achieve your goal. And you might use a scaling technique, which would go on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to this particular action? And the person may say, well, I'm committed to it 8 out of 10. And then as coach, you would come back and say, what do you need to do to make it 9 out of 10? Notice not moving it to 10 out of 10, but going from 8 to 9. This kind of coaching is based on small steps which have big impact. The other people refer to it as the wrap-up session, which is going through what has gone on in the session and then thinking about the action plan, agreeing on the action plan, and then parting from the meeting. So you have a choice there about which understanding of W you want to take. There is another process in executive coaching, one which is gaining in a lot of popularity, certainly in Europe, and it's called solution-focused coaching. And solution-focused coaching is very interesting because what happens in solution focus is you spend very little time exploring the issue or the problem that your executive or your coachee brings you. What you do is try to move very quickly towards finding a solution for the problem. And there are some key techniques in order to do that. One technique is called scaling. As I've just mentioned, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you now? Get a number from the person, treat that number seriously, 10 being good, 1 being not so good, and you ask them what they need to do to move it to the next number up. You may also ask questions like, supposing that wasn't the case, supposing it wasn't like you've described, how would that be? Now that can sometimes move the problem completely out of the way so that people start imagining or supposing how this new situation might be. And from that, they might start to develop insight into what they could do. Another way would be to say, how did you get yourself into that situation? How were you before that happened? Is also a very good technique in helping people to think about how they may move forward with a solution. And one of the most interesting techniques in solution focus is called the miracle question. And this is one of my favorites as a technique. And it's very useful in helping people to imagine their solution. And it goes like this. You ask your coachee, your executive, or your client to imagine that we have finished our coaching session and it's come to the end of the day and they've gone home and they've done what they normally do in the evening, and then they go to bed and they fall asleep, and during the night a miracle happens. This issue, this problem, this topic that we're talking about is completely resolved. It's gone away. But the coachee or the client doesn't know that because they're asleep. But what happens is they wake up in the morning. So you wake up in the morning and you start to notice that something has changed. What is it that you notice? And what you do is you take them from the minute they imagine themselves waking up and you ask them what it is they notice about how they feel, what they're saying, what people are saying to them, what they're having for their breakfast, what they're doing in the car, when they get to work, what's happening at work, what people are saying to them, and you go for detail. You get detailed description of how they are feeling now the miracle has happened. And when you've completed that process, you say to them, what one thing did you notice in that miracle which you can actually go and do right now? And very often it will lead to them working on a solution that they can work with because they can see it, they can feel it, they've imagined it. So that's solution focus. It's a very, very interesting technique, and it's one which can be used often for short bursts in coaching sessions. So one of the ideas behind solution focus is that it needs to be done quickly, like 30 minutes, to resolve a particular problem. So it can be a very useful technique. So I hope you found that useful and interesting, and I'll speak to you again sometime soon. Thank you very much for listening.